Good afternoon. I feel privileged to be here with you today with fellow Christians across South Australia, and to have this opportunity to speak with you today about a statement from the heart. You know, for us, that statement from the heart was a cry from our nation to you, to all Australians, that we want a change, we want a difference to take place. We want to be valued, we want to be embraced, we want to be able to have a future and to give to our children a future that is full of prosperity, love, hope, and generosity. Now, for us, you know, a lot of my people, you know, we've come to a place, I've been doing this and speaking about these topics for the last 40 odd years or more. And, you know, after a while, it gets really tiring because you have to ask yourself, who's listening? Now, back in the 80s and the 90s, you know, our churches were right there providing national leadership across this country around voicing the aspirations and supporting the aspirations of Australia First Nations, calling for justice, calling for reconciliation, calling for restitution. And, you know, it's time again I reach out to you and I ask that you know, join us again in raising our voice, but more importantly, become a part of our voice, calling the government and this nation to a place of, whether it's a covenant or a treaty, whatever word you're feeling comfortable with, I encourage you to use it. But let's put this history, this past of our colonial history to bed. Let's right the wrongs. You know, God has called us to be his witness in this land, to be able to represent justice, to fight for justice, but to deliver justice. And, you know, it's time again for the churches and Christians all over Australia to join us and to unite with us as we call for an end. And the end can only be through a treaty or a covenant. You know, churches, you have an opportunity here to lead the moral integrity of this country, to be able to demonstrate to Australians and young generations the integrity of the church, and that it is, you know, has the courage to enter into those difficult conversations which we might like, but we trust that Christ is with us in those conversations, where our lives can be transformed. And, you know, not only that of the oppressor, but that of the oppressed. More importantly, that we can find redemption. Do you know, the one thing that I've come to understand is, you know, sadly, my redemption is tied to your redemption. So it's only, we both can only be free when we do it together. And, you know, and create a new future, a new world that sees us walking together hand in hand. The world that Christ has called us to create. A world that is just, that is equal, that allows all to prosper, but most importantly, that we respect one another as life goes on. And we value, you know, there's no other world in this, no other country in the world that can state we have the oldest living culture in the world, except Australia. Have you stopped to think about that? You have the oldest living culture in the world. And do you stop to think about what that means to you as an Australian? Do we value it? Do we treasure it? Do we want to maintain it? Do we want to protect it? do we want to share it? You know, the one thing that I fear the most is that one day we could lose it and we no longer are able to state that we have the oldest living culture in this world, because our children are dying at an alarming rate. You know, what does it say to us when our children have no hope and therefore, you know, choose to opt out of life because they are so tired of combating racism and being told how worthless they are, and they have no value to offer? Can you see a child with that sort of, you know, grief and hopelessness? Just think of it. We had a 9-year-old little girl who took her life. 9 years old. My gosh, you know, what takes a child to a place of hopelessness? The life experience. She saw no value, no hope in a world in Australia where she would be cherished, where she would be given opportunities to prosper, where she would be valued. That is such a sad realisation for our children, and one that I mourn greatly about. You know, churches, you've been with us for a long time. And over the past decade, yes, you have grappled with hard issues and things that have confronted you. And you've entered into those hard conversations and you found resolution and restoration. May have not found forgiveness, but you've certainly done your best to do justice and to right the wrongs. Now here's another opportunity to enter into those hard conversations with your churches, your congregations, your Christian community, and ask, what more can we do to ensure justice for our First Nation? What more should we do as Christians who are called by God to do justice? Surely there's more. Our people so desperately need hope. And what you don't understand, the hope that we need to see is you standing with us, you lifting our voice, you walking arm in arm with us towards justice. That is where hope is for us, is when we can have this nation join us. Remember, for those back to 1988, when we did the March for Justice, Freedom and Hope, the vision of Reverend Charles Harris, and 20,000 Aboriginal or First Nation peoples come from around Australia, and we were joined by 30,000 non-Indigenous Australians. Do you know, the hope that was generated by your presence on that day was overwhelming. You just don't realise what it means to us to have you stand for us, walk with us, and fight with us for justice. It means a lot. It means a transformation is taking place in this country where Aboriginal people are valued, we have worth, we're being affirmed, and we have something of significance to offer this country. We have a relationship with the Creator that expands 140,000 years. Doesn't that have meaning? Doesn't that have worth within our context as Christians? Don't you want to hear more about how God's hand in this country created the world that we know? And how God spoke into our people, and how the Spirit of God still exists in this land and lives amongst us. It cries with us, it mourns with us, it weeps with us as we lose our loved ones. It cries in our suffering. You know, we imagine when we talk about Jesus, we talk about Jesus rolling the swag out at the campsite amongst our people, listening and sharing with our people in their suffering, and saying, I am here with you in the midst of your suffering. I am here to bring hope, to bring restitution, to bring justice, but most of all, liberation. Can you, the church, can you be that witness? Can you amplify Christ's witness to us and to the nation, and tell Australia, this is where we want to be. This is where we should be. This is where God calls us to be, on the side of the oppressed, on the side of the downtrodden, on the side of the poor, and most of all, on the side of the least. Where God says, what you do for the least, you do for me. So how do we minister to the least in this time? And in this country, the least is my people. I offer to you and I extend to you my hand to join me, to bring justice to this land, to bring freedom and liberation to a nation, but most of all, trust in our Lord that transformation can take place, that we can transform a nation, and we can rise up in our leadership to bring Australia with us as we call the government to accountability, as we say as a nation, enough's enough. We need a treaty. We need to deal with this in a just manner, and so we can then move forward to a future that has hope, prosperity, equality, and inclusiveness for all. That's what I'm asking from you. That's what I'd like, is if we can begin those conversations. You know what God's called us to be. You know what God's called us to do. I don't have to repeat that to you because you know. And I pray today that the Lord lays it on your heart, that, you know, He stirs your heart into action, that you are moved by compassion and a deep sense of justice to want to make the word live in this country, to be a living action and a reflection of God's justice in this world. So join us as we stand arm in arm to be able to address and bring about the resolution, a just resolution that God has mandated us to do, and for us to deliver it, and to be able to have the church and the Christian community lead this nation towards restitution and redemption. Thank you so very much for listening.